Live from deep in an underground bunker in East Tennessee, this is America's premier mortgage fuel services expert, Paul Williams.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to welcome you back to another edition of Foreclosurepedia Podcast. Foreclosurepedia Podcast presentation of the Foreclosurepedia Radio Network, which premieres weekly. Tonight, we're in the roundtable discussion with FireWire. That's where the Foreclosurepedia Nation sits down, and we have a roundtable discussion about not labor and management, but about the environment that both have to coexist in. The date is the 10th of May. The time is 20:37 hours Eastern Daylight Time. My guests this evening are Aaron Aviero. Mr. Aviero is the Chief Operating Officer of All Day LLC. He's also the proprietor of the All Day LLC blog. Additionally, with us tonight, we have Brett Douglas. Brett Douglas is the owner and the founder of Ironclad Preservation. You can always reach out to Brett, at teamironclad.com. With respect to Aaron Aviero, you can always view his blog at alldayllc.com. Tonight's discussion that we're going to have this evening, in a regulatory environment that now is becoming compliant, we're going to talk about the Service Contract Act. And precisely what is the Service Contract Act? Technically, it's known as the McNamara-O'Hara Service Contract Act of 1965. In its pertinent form, and I'm going to quote here from the United States Department of Labor, every service employee performing any of the government contract work under a service contract in excess of $2,500 must be paid not less than the monetary wages and must be furnished fringe benefits which the Secretary of Labor has determined to be prevailing in the locality for the classification in which the employee is working, or the wage rates and fringe benefits, including any accrued or prospective wage rates and fringe benefits contained in a predecessor contract's collective bargaining agreement. By and large, what we're talking about is Section 6A1 of the Fair Labor Standards Act. And why is this important, ladies and gentlemen? It is important because we know that United States Department of Labor, Wage and Hour Division, in conjunction with the United States Department of Housing and Urban Development, has recently entered into litigation in the state of New York against companies within the mortgage field services industry whom are conducting services in New York, Pennsylvania, and New Jersey. Mr. Aviero, I'm going to start off with you. I'd like you to go ahead and just introduce yourself. I think most people know you, but, here's your Andy Warhol's 15 minutes of fame.
Hey, yeah. Hey, my name's Aaron. I'm the Chief Operating Officer with All Day LLC out here in Silver Springs, Nevada. Currently, we're in the process of doing some fundraising to shift our business model a little bit, but for the since the end of 2007, we have relied heavily for our incoming revenue to come from the property preservation industry, and this is something we are in the process of changing, and we're getting ready to do it really very rapidly, if you will. We've kind of backed out of the property preservation industry about 2 years ago. Lacey and I had discussions on what type of clients we wanted to have, what some of our liabilities were, and this issue right here, the SCA, that came into play with a lot of our decision-making process because the numbers offered out there just do not allow you to pay and follow, the Service Contract Act or anything else that goes along with government contracting or government work. And again, it was a conscious decision. Maybe we should have shifted gears a little quicker than what we have. But again, that's one of those live and learn things when you are in business and you're, trying to operate the three-wing circus, as they say. At this time, like I said, this is a very, very tough dichotomy, and I don't know how I honestly don't know how it's going to play out, because there's a lot of key elements involved here as to, from my position as a person who has to oversee a company and make sure that it stays liquid. When you start labor, that's the number one cost of any business, is labor. It is going to cost you more in the long run than any other item you have to consider, whether that's insurance, license, I don't care what it is. Labor is going to beat you to death from a business perspective when it comes to cost of doing business. And when, like I said, when you can't agree on a contract that is going to cover these numbers, I also am involved in commercial glazing or glass work, putting up glass buildings and stuff. And when we work on schools or government buildings, prevailing wage is involved. It's a little clause in the contracts called prevailing wage. And when prevailing wage is involved, I may work on a school that is a government contract or a grant. I make prevailing wage that day. If I'm working for a company just putting in windows in a house or doing what they call a hack out, fixing something in a commercial building, I'm getting whatever the company is paying me an hour, which is usually about half of prevailing wage. So, but again, in that situation where I am earning a prevailing wage on a job site, my employer for that contract, he negotiated based on prevailing wage. It's not, here, do this, we're going to pay you this. There's a whole different element there involved when you start getting into working on government jobs and government contracts. And in preservation work, again, one of the decisions we made, the money's not there to pay the labor. Let's start shifting. Let's go where the money is. And like I announced today on the website, one of the services we have stopped completely is snow removal service. I still haven't paid for a snowblower we bought in 2009. We don't get any snow.
I want to get excuse me. I want to get Brett Douglas in on this discussion, and the reason that I think incidentally, Brett Douglas is the founder and the owner of Ironclad Preservation. That's TeamIronclad.com. The one of the reasons that I find Brett's opinion to both be fascinating and poignant is the fact that, so Brett is located in what I call ground zero, and that's Florida. And so Mr. Douglas, why don't you introduce yourself to the listeners of the Foreclosurepedia Nation, and if you would, talk to us just a little bit with specificity to how you believe that the Service Contract Act may or may not impact, say, your company.
Well, thank you, Paul, for the lead-in, and thank you, Aaron, for being on the line tonight. I certainly want to take a step back real quick and wanted to congratulate you guys on getting this forum up and running. I think as we look forward to the future, I can certainly hope that for all of the Foreclosurepedia Nation, the Alliday followers, and people around in our segued industry here, we want to continue this trend, because this is some neat things to get online and just talk on a podcast about issues that are affecting us all, and how we can embrace this change. But in specific, talk about what this concept is about the Service Contracting Act. Aaron has a great point, as we've listened to him over time and Paul's put out there. Our industry has not embraced this. It's always been, like Aaron puts out, that we're basically told what we're going to do, and that's how it is. But I think as this industry is changing, the landscape is definitely changing so rapidly. I think that these issues are going to come into play, and it's how, as a company, we can embrace that change, whether we're going to survive, what's coming down the road. So I certainly wanted to talk about that. Ironclad Preservation has always been a labor W-2 based firm, and some of the problems we have, we always want to take care of our employees and want to pay them a fair wage. We've had some issues with some low paying clients, and like Aaron's always put out there, and certainly you have also, Paul, that some of these low paying contracts, we've had to get rid of them and try to go to the higher paying ones. Well, I think it's certainly going to be interesting to see how this, as the more of the Department of Labor gets involved, the more Department of Justice, I think we're going to find out, unfortunately, in this wild west of our industry, a lot of the stuff's not been regulated, and as they start to put downward pressure on us and they start to screw down, I think that everything is going to be in a tipsy-turvy type turmoil. We need to adapt and change, or we're all going to falter.
You know, one of the interesting elements. So any time that any industry, and not just the mortgage field services industry, has to begin to actually look at the landscape of regulation. So in this, when we talk about the SCA, we're not just talking about the financing. We're actually talking about technology, the ability to both internally confirm that a company is regulatorily compliant, but then in addition, it's the actual implementation, the obtaining, if you will, of that technological infrastructure, which to me seems like an infrastructure investment. Mr. Aviero, do you see this, and I know you have somewhat diversified, if you will, your portfolio moving away, but do you find this, let's say from the journalistic point of view, do you find that there may be an issue in both having to onboard new facets of technology, and the fact of the matter being that the money isn't really out there to ensure compliance with SCA?
You know, yeah, this whole, it creates a very difficult dichotomy for business owners, because that one element, revenue is not there, and it's supposed to be there. So, and I have said this, I've been saying this since 2009, and I will never budge. I never, ever, and I can't say it enough, ever read or was instructed by any of my professors or instructors when I was going to school that I am obligated in any way, shape, or form to honor another company's contractual obligations. And this is the one very difficult issue in the property preservation industry that really does have to be addressed. If you're going to negotiate a contract, and this is why I got so livid years ago with PK Management. They called me up, they discussed numbers with me, and then they came back at 65% under the numbers we agreed upon, saying, oh, we were just gathering information. No, they were not. They were negotiating with me because there was an exchange. There was an exchange of conversation, an exchange of numbers. We're not, the labor end of the industry right now is not involved in the negotiating, and the people negotiating to win the contracts are not considering labor in their negotiations. And that's a very key element. In 2009, I started saying, hey, labor has no seat at the table. Labor has no seat at the table. And if I'm not mistaken, call me crazy, but I'm still saying the same thing. There's no seat at the table, and that is the dichotomy. When you're a business owner and you try to keep your company liquid, you can't do it because you have more going out in labor than what's coming in for a service. And it's like I'm saying, labor is the biggest chunk of whatever you do to complete a service. Labor is going to be the biggest chunk of the cost to get that done. So you have to step back.
Well, I apologize for interrupting, but on that point, Brett Douglas, actually presents with a very interesting, equation. So Mr. Douglas owns a company. Mr. Douglas actually works in the field with his company and side by side on occasion with those employees, those W-2 based employees has. So Mr. Douglas, I think, presents with a quandary. So the first portion of the quandary is that so he is a company owner who must be able to negotiate a fair contract price, with specificity to being able to pay his overhead, to pay his employees, to pay for his workman's comp, et cetera, ad nauseum, and yet he also works in the field. So Mr. Douglas, to you, I present the question, do you feel currently and currently within the mortgage field services industry that there is a tremendous amount of regulation that is being pushed downward? However, there doesn't appear, at least right now, to be, compensation which is accompanying that downward pressure.
Well, that's a great point, Paul. And to your defense there, that's exactly what I think. We might all present a different side of the coin. Obviously, you guys are way more intelligent than me and way more opposed.
Oh, no. Let's not go there. Let's not go there. Let's
throw out the what's going on in the industry. And I'm pretty much the simpleton that's been out there been out there just accepting the pricing, like Aaron said. And I think, unfortunately, not to on this panel, I think as we move forward, maybe if we don't mention names, we're not here to really bash other
absolutely
companies.
not. Absolutely not.
Yeah, and what I think is happening. And in defense, I think that all of these big companies have kind of been the ones that have been given the ball when the economy changed and into this crisis. I mean, I'm sure Aaron will agree with this. When the crisis hit in 2008, most people don't realize there's a lot of us that have been doing this. In fact, I'm not trying to blow my own horn, but I was involved in this industry in 1997. And the pricing was just incredible. And I'm sure that if Aaron was around in those days, he probably would say the same thing. We used to generate, say, $6,000 on a trash out. There was this and that. Unfortunately, the people have been presented when the volumes increased. I think everyone negotiated exactly what Aaron just alluded to. Everybody was locked out of the bargaining, if you say. They went behind closed doors, as Paul would always say. They kind of hashed it out. They agreed that, we're going to sell our souls to get this volume. I really don't care what the end result, because we're going to sub this out. They're shaking hands with the devil. And they really don't care how that event happens downstream. But what happened was it created a logjam as the volumes have decreased. Exactly what Paul says is what my campaign thing has been. I think when we first came out with the background checks, once again, we can say that everything has been a falsehood. We were misled. We were put on the ruby glasses and we're told the background checks are for labor. How dare you put someone on the property that we have to worry about? I think that's the greatest insult that's been perpetrated on, let's throw out someone's phrase, any mortgage field service provider. It doesn't mean if it's me as a W-2 laborer, I'm out there. The hoax of this is that what we're trying to do is say that, a great person who writes a mortgage contract, they want to feel safe knowing that as you're cutting that grass, that the next door neighbor can feel safe that you're sitting there. I think that's the biggest travesty. That is a waste of time, a waste of energy. My best whatever. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I was going to interject something right along what you're saying there, Brett. When I entered this industry, I negotiated every service fee we had.
Sure. Well, that's what you're supposed to do, right? If you're a true Correct. Independent contractor, they should look to you for your expertise. As Paul put out there, you're a W-2 provider. You know what your cost of doing business. You take a materials times 3. You look at the approach of everything. You look at sometimes you can negotiate. You figure a price, and that's what it is. I don't understand how they can easily say that this is what I need you to do for $300. That's the price I'm paying. I don't care what kind of obstacles you have in your way. So, but
and that's what it has come down to. But here's what I saw in 2009, and I think this was really a crux of how, where, why, whatever you want to call it, the industry is in a state of and I'm calling it confusion because it is. Nobody knows their butt from their nose right now. How to undo and how to stop the downward spiral and the madness. But this is what I witnessed and what I saw. And Lacey and I were caught right in the middle, and we almost pulled the trigger. And then we said, nah, this is kind of very similar to a Ponzi or a pyramid scheme. What we saw when we were going to the conventions around the country, we saw companies selling their company for $1 million+ retaining the contract with the provider, with the national, and then subbing the work, taking 20%. And this mantra, you can only make money subbing, kind of developed and it came about. And now we've got this madness of everybody. And I'm sorry, I'm not going to negotiate any number with you if you're the third person in line on the money.
Sure.
That to me is a definition of insanity.
And staying on point, what?
Yeah, I was going to say we need to get back on the point of what you said, Paul.
What we're really talking about here is we're talking about a Sisyphean model, and so there was this guy years ago, millennia ago, and his name was King Sisyphus, and in essence, what happened was, so he was punished for his his chronic deceitfulness, and so what happened was, so the gods, they compelled him to roll this immense boulder uphill only to watch it roll back down, and so this action had to be, repeated forever. So there's the Reader's Digest word for the day, Sisyphean. And basically what this means is, so herein is a task that one must do that one can never prevail upon. So when we talk about, when we talk about the Service Contract Act. And so this is part of the landscape now. We know it is. So Foreclosurepedia filed a formal FOIA, Freedom of Information Act request to 5 U.S.C. Pertaining to Service Contract Act, its applicability in the industry. Craig Carnes was kind enough. Craig is the director of the M&M. He's based down in the Atlanta field office, and he said, absolutely. He said, absolutely,
Sure.
Service Contract Act applies. Absolutely, Davis-Bacon applies with specificity to grass cutting, to debris removal, to the building of handrails, and that's all a quote, and that's the end quote. Sure. But in addition, there's this term called FLSA, and I don't want to get too deep in this, but basically that means Fair Labor Standards Act. Now, on the 26th of February, 2015, and I'm going to quote here, this is from the Department of Labor, U.S. Department of Labor. This is the OSHA news release, dating April 13, 2015, and on the 26th of February, Alliance Property Services PA, Secure Assets First, Imperial Property Services, and Michael McCaffrey were sued. Now, I don't want to get into the merits of the suit, all right, but what I do want to read is what the allegation was. An investigation by the Albany District Office of the United States Department of Labor's Wage and Hour Division found that the defendants violated the overtime minimum wage. Here, I think everybody needs to listen to this part, record-keeping and anti-retaliation requirements of the Fair Labor Standards Act. Two things happened here. A, both HUD, because this dealt with companies within the mortgage field services industry, and the Department of Labor came together, combined forces, and said we have an issue. Now, this wasn't just employees. This dealt with subcontractors, so you can infer, if you will, that perhaps the United States government is no longer walking the dog by saying everybody's W-9. And so the point that portion that I want to focus on is, and I keep hearing, for example, I hear both you, Mr. Douglas, and Mr. Aviero state there's no seat, if you will, at the table. I think first we need to define what is the table. So, for example, when for want of better words, a national client, I'm trying to get away from the order mill language here. I really am. It's a struggle. Sure. It's like being an addict. But, Well,
I was wanting to interject something real quick, Paul. I think you and I think along the same lines. Believe it or not, sometimes we can't reach across the table, but I think we both agree in this, you and Natalie, that the problem is we have too many layerings, and like Aaron says, and I think ultimately what the answer is, it's really quite simple. Somewhere, like you're saying, we need to set the metric that this is a discussion that's going to have to take place, and I think, unfortunately, some of these middle layers have to get out of the way. That's just, as we move forward, I think everybody wants to be in compliance. I think the story that you're bringing up, when I looked at that thing, because you provided that information for me, or it was on your website, but I almost think that gentleman that was doing the crimes that he committed was probably a dirtbag, and he was writing 2 checks out of 2 separate companies. He was doing this and that. That guy's not going to be around because, you know what, he's not a good performer as far as I read into that. I think the companies that want to do the right thing, I don't think that anybody would be bringing anger against the ones trying to do the fair thing. And I think that we need to all get together. And, obviously, you guys have such a powerful message out there. There are straight-up dirtbags in our industry that have to go away. I don't think you're going to argue that. I don't think Eric Miller Dance would argue that. I don't think that anybody who's out there is going to argue there are some very bad operators. Some recently just passed out of our industry. I think some of those were pre-calculated and they needed to go away. But I think we have a lot of cleaning up to do around here. And I think when the dust settles, the W-2-based companies that are going to be granted some more work, I think exactly correct. There is absolutely, I'm just going to end on this note with this thing about the Service Agreement Act. We would never be able to pay prevailing wages. Let's say $18 an hour for a foreman to go out and cut grass. If your laborers are out there at $12 an hour, when they're only reimbursing us $40 at the time, $45, that's not going to work. However, the problem is the HUD's paying way higher than that. With HUD's pricing, remember how we were just talking about that before, Paul? If their actual wages were getting paid towards the people providing the service, I think we all would be happy. Don't you agree with that?
Oh, absolutely. And I'm coming up on a hard press. I have to have to do the station identification. So the time is 21:02 hours Eastern Daylight Time. This is the Foreclosurepedia podcast, which is a presentation of the Foreclosurepedia Radio Network. Tonight, we are discussing the Service Contract Act, its applicability upon companies within the mortgage field services industry. My guests tonight are Aaron Albiero, who is the Chief Operating Officer of All Day LLC. You can locate him at alldayllc.com. And Brett Douglas, the founder and owner of Ironclad Preservation. You can reach out to him at teamironclad.com. And additionally, one other point on Mr. Douglas. Mr. Douglas is the driving force behind Florida FAST. That's the the Field Association of Servicing Technicians. With all this said, you know, one of the deals, so tracking, and when we look at this news brief, and incidentally, the release number is 15 TAC 0471, TAC November Echo William. So what we are talking about here, they use a very key phrase here, and what we're talking about is record keeping. You know, I get quite a lot of publications. I just got May's version of or issue of Inside Counsel, and that's because I do a lot of work with the American Bar Association. In that, and I'm so I will quote from page 28 of InsideCounsel.com. That's the May 2015 edition. They're speaking about biometric technology in the workplace, and while the industry has not per se moved over into biometrics, what we do have is so we have the background check. So like Aspen Grove or not, the reality is, much like Obamacare, it is the law of the land or the law of the industry. And so we have yet an additional expense. And so when we're talking about regulatory compliance,
Sure.
and whether or not, and there's a lot of arguments, myself included, out there about is the background check required under Dodd-Frank and blah, blah. The reality is that it's a real-world expense. And so at some point in time, there has to be, and I concur with Mr. Douglas and Mr. Aviero, that there has to be some type of facilitation in the negotiation at the prime vendor level, wherein either A, when the prime vendor, negotiates upon a contract, it is either A, making sure that the monies are passing all the way down to the bottom, wherein labor is actually being properly compensated to comply with the background checks, to comply with SCA, or B, if they do not want to be responsible for that, then I concur. Those layers, if you will, the order mills or whatever we want to call them, they have to be done away with. Mr. Aviero, what say you with respect to that?
I say this, and I say this with all due respect to Mr. Douglas, but these companies need to come home. They need to stop all the outsourcing mentality. They need to come home. The infrastructure is here. There's absolutely no reason there's not a bank, Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, or anybody negotiating with Mr. Douglas. We cover 12,000 square miles or better out here. There's no reason those people don't come discuss my particular what will be needed to provide the quality that they want.
Well, Aaron, real quick, what you're talking about is this is what happened. If I'm not mistaken, this is the way the business was handled before the Nationals arose on the scene in 2008, right, Paul? About 2008. The landscape changed then. The Nationals came into play when we had these huge numbers of volumes. I don't know, Paul, I refer to your knowledge of that. but I'm assuming we're, 25% what we used to be? I mean, the numbers are ridiculously low right now.
If that, and I don't want to get too far off point, but to toss the question back to Mr. Arbiero, when you say come home, so are you talking about the processing of the work order, or are you talking about wherein?
What I'm talking about is the mortgage itself. There's no reason the mortgage in Silver Springs, Nevada, is sitting in a bank in Paris, France, that gets transferred back over to someplace in Kentucky.
That I will guarantee.
Those infrastructures are there.
That I will guarantee you will never have. That will never happen, and there's two reasons. One is we don't have Glass-Steagall anymore, and number two is because we have a neat term called securitization. But with that said,
what about the servicing? I thought that's kind of where we were going with it. That basically, I think the question was posed was, do we have so many layers of subbing? I believe that we've joked about it for a long time. We've got to get rid of all the fat that's there. The middle people have got to go. There's just some reason. There's really not justification, for that level, right?
Absolutely, and that segues me into, and so it'll be kind of a final component because it's Mother's Day. And so I want to wish everybody out there, a happy Mother's Day, and that includes even even those whom I might have issues within unnamed organizations. So whether they did right or wrong, whether they're bankrupt or not, the reality is everybody, we wish you all a happy Mother's Day. But when we speak about and I think the proper term would be outsourcing. So when we talk about the outsourcing of a work order, this also, when you juxtapose the term remote, virtual versus, say, brick and mortar, to me, they are one and the same.
Concept.
Yeah, so to me, it's one and the same. And so when I talk about, so we can all say, okay, if I'm a company and I have, 100,000 work orders, there's no way that I, as a company, am going to process all those. I'm not vehemently opposed to the outsourcing of the processing of that material because that simply is the 21st century. What I am adamantly opposed to is that those firms whom are allowed to do that do not have to subject themselves to the same regulatory compliance as we have here in the United States. And when we additionally...
I'm sorry, but I believe that, what is that, the Consumer Protection Bureau, I believe that reads different. It reads everybody in the industry, not just certain sectors. It reads everybody in the industry.
What do you mean? Wait, clarify that, Mr. Javier.
No. I think he's saying he's agreeing with all of us that we can't pick and choose. The background checks need to apply to the people who are creating the loans, the people who are servicing the loans, the people who are actually processing loans.
Yes.
Saying it's for everybody, right? Is that?
That is my understanding. And again,
but it's not. It's not.
I don't have some Socrates degree or
anything. It's not being applied, though. You see, it's not being applied, and so that is the problem that I have. So if I can go tomorrow morning and I can hire an outfit, most of them are either in Bangalore or Bangladesh.
Yep.
If I can reach out to and they're not subjected to the same the cost of the background checks that my people internally would be, to me, I think the catchphrase there...
It's not a fair practice.
Yes, it's an unfair economic advantage. And then additionally, for example, Mr. Douglas has what we call a brick-and-mortar facility. So this is a facility that he is engaged in commerce, wherein his equipment, his people, and everything are there. But when you have
Can I throw out a price comparison real quick so some of your audience could listen?
Sure.
The difference is there's two different components real quick just to throw out. And as a business owner, I've looked at it over and over, and I'm just not on board with it. The average cost of outsourcing it to India, you basically pay. It's sweatshop labor. You're going to get somebody for six days a week. You're guaranteed a certain amount of hours, but basically they're going to pay $200 a week for that person. The problem is my brick-and-mortar employees, I compensate at least $500 a week for each of those.
Well,
and here's the point. I was going to tell you that what you're saying, Paul, is absolutely correct, because I'm going to tell you in negotiations, sitting listening to some of these other associations that we don't mention, being polite, they are mortally concerned that the weak link in the chain is going to bring it down is these remote processors.
Well,
I think you hit it on the nail.
And this is the point of Service Contract Act. So how is it precisely? Sure. Because a lot of people don't understand. So administrative staff are required by law to be paid under Service Contract Act. So how precisely can a company legally shoot it over there? But when we also talk about the new up-and-coming, if you will, virtual offices, and so these do fit the classic criteria for order mill. How is it fair? Okay, so at your office, I'm going to presume you have X amount of computers, and that those computers go through one router and not 50 of them. They're not at Wi-Fi at McDonald's. They're not at, some hotel getting, high and drunk and on Facebook and porn or whatever. So how is it fair that you, as a brick-and-mortar owner...
Can I interject one other point? What if that person who is deemed a trustee employee of your company is actually taking stuff from your company and supplying it to another company, competition, or something along that lines? There's a lot of nefarious activities that these people that are placed in trust are committing that nobody would even have a recollection of, right?
I mean, exactly. And so what I'm saying is when you have a brick-and-mortar company, so there is oversight on that at all times. And so if there is that oversight, that's an expense in addition to complying with the Service Contract Act. So the compliance is ongoing. When you're dealing in a remote setting, there is no compliance. And so that to me strikes me as an unfair economic advantage. So how can we have this tremendous layer of order mills, for want of better words, whom have an unfair economic advantage, and we turn a blind eye and we say, hey, so these people have to comply and these don't.
Sure. And if you really look at it, Paul, I hate to say this, but as a company who is basically kind of like how Aaron did, we've built ourselves up from the ground up. I've never taken a loan. I've never done anything. Yes, I have some independent money. But the point is, I have never, from the beginning, I built a brick-and-mortar company and always wanted an LPS to come and inspect my facility, come and look at what I have. I have the security, I have the fire rooms. Paul, you've been there. You've seen what we've accomplished and what we've hoped to do. We've generated some huge training arenas. We've done all these things. I don't know many companies that have what we have. We actually are a real facility in real time, built this huge mega center, and none of these nationals will come and visit us. And the problem that really irritates me is everybody else they're not aware of what the pricing is to have that facility. And how you just mentioned, where do we get to that holy land where we sit down and we look at the cost? I want to do your fair prevailing wages for my people. I want to know what it's required of me if I'm going to bid on a HUD contract. It's not just get the thing and look what last year's awardees were awarded. And I think that's the problem. And we're not going to mention those names, but I'm hoping and I'm absolutely optimistic as we move forward that we actually understand our costs, that people engage the services of Paul Williams, engage Aaron Alliday, look at these costs of operating our businesses, come up with some really good intel on how we have to price these books of services in the future, and some of this can move forward. Gone are the days they're telling us we can do a full trash out for $300. That's just got to stop. That's ludicrous.
Well, I appreciate each of you. Like I say, Aaron Aviero, he's the Chief Operating Officer of Alliday LLC. Aaron also does consulting within the industry, and he is also heavily involved in the organic farming industry. So I would say that this is a successful diversification, within Alliday LLC's portfolio. Brett Douglas, as we know, is the founder and the owner of Team Ironclad. You can reach him at teamironclad.com. If you want to, reach out and speak with he or his staff at any point in time, it's 1-855-TEAM-IRONCLAD. And just as a side note, we'd like to congratulate Mr. Douglas, on having a successful FAST convention. That's the second one. I think that's incredible. Also, additionally, Mr. Douglas has recently begun onboarding personnel within his business. Kathy Tyner has brought over a tremendous amount of talent and is directly both involved with Team Ironclad and additionally with the FAST movement. And on that note, I'd like to, Aaron, give you 60 seconds, shout out to the Foreclosurepedia Nation, and the same with Brett Douglas. So, Aaron?
Hey, you know what? Right now we are in the middle of a fundraiser here at Alladay LLC. We're having a major auction this coming May 16th. Anybody want to help? You can by going to the website, hitting the share button at the bottom, push it out to Facebook, push it out to Reddit, Tumblr, well, whatever social media platform, other ones that you're on there. We would sincerely appreciate that. The more people that see what we're doing, perhaps the better the auction is going to be. We're going to have a beverage booth. We'll have some preferred parking out here, event staff parking. We also have Fat Burger is coming in to cater for us, provide some food. So it's going to be a most entertaining day here, and we're doing this to push more into, as you alluded to, Paul, organic farming. We want to expand that part of our operation a little bit. We've had some really good success locally here, and we want to build on that.
Excellent. Mr. Douglas?
Well, I certainly wanted to say thank you, Paul and Aaron, for jumping on tonight. And I want to kind of end this on a serious note that obviously I think Ironclad kind of runs independently, and we're where we need to be as this new change comes down. But I wanted to take this opportunity, Paul, to let you know that Ironclad is going to be donating $250 to your company Monday for Foreclosurepedia. We want to bring this new type of kind of like meet the town hall type podcasting out. We want to obviously support that. Now, I want to reach out into your nation tonight, into the Foreclosurepedia nation. And guys, as you sit and listen to this, there's a lot of people who might, come on this thing and listen to it and have not donated in the past. And there are a few people. I believe the numbers are probably 8, 9, maybe 10 people who have always, tried to reach out and help Paul donate to his mission. I'm asking you personally, as somebody, whether you believe I'm a friend of the labor or I'm heavily involved in NAMPS, whatever the thing is, we believe that this is a good program. We want to get behind that. So this is going to be a reoccurring donation too. I want to set that up with you, Paul, offline. But your first payment of $250 is heading your way. We know that you have the expenses involved in doing this. You've set up a nice studio. In fact, I believe you're the only one in the nation right now that's providing this. And we want to get behind you, and thank you for inviting us in on a guest.
Well, I appreciate that. I'm dumbfounded, but I really do appreciate that. Going forward, ladies and gentlemen, so we're hoping to have a very holistic panel. Eventually, we're going to Richard Law, founder and proprietor of Sophie, did not have the ability to be on this evening. But Mr. Law is going to join us every Sunday evening. And what we're going to do is, so by Wednesday of every week, we're going to publish what the subject matter is, and we're actually going to open up the call lines. And so this will be wherein, just like Meet the Press, so we will have a panel whom will sit down and discuss matters, and we will field, topics coming in and out as questions coming in and out with specificity to those topics. And because we do have the ability, because as I'm speaking to you tonight, we're actually live. We are streaming both on AM and FM out here in Blaine, Tennessee, but we also stream live via the internet. There is that 2-minute of lag. So we can do that. We can deal with idiots, and which people like me, or we can
the drum, huh?
Yeah, but so we have that ability to facilitate anything. But I do appreciate that, and I want to stress, so none of these FireWire town hall meetings are going to deal with kicking anybody in the gut. This is to deal with the topic and the subject matters that are coming, into the landscape, and hopefully others out there will pick up the material and say, hey, you know what? So we can use this, and we'll use it, and we can't use this other over here, so we're not going to use it, But
if I could say one more comment real quick, Paul.
Sure.
I want to tell you from another association that we don't have to aforemention. We three tend to get a lot of criticism one way or another, and I really think at the end of the day, I hope that people understand we all might have a different perspective on what we do, how we do things, but I really believe from the bottom of my heart in front of the Lord and all, I don't want to throw Christianity out there, but I believe that we are trying to help the industry, and I think people have got to get behind that maybe sometimes it's a little harsh, maybe it's a little rude, it's in your face, but I believe that ultimately we're trying to do a right thing here. And I wish more people would get behind us and realize that anything is painful when it incurs good change. And I think that we're having to go through some pain points. And thank you for inviting me on, Paul and Aaron. I certainly appreciate it, guys.
Sure, will do. And we'll be back on this, as always, every Sunday evening at 2000 Eastern Daylight. So there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. As usual, you may reach me on Google Plus at D. Paul Williams, LinkedIn, Paul Williams, and the LinkedIn group Property Preservation Consortium, Twitter, Foreclosurepedia. We stream all our podcasts on iTunes, Foreclosurepedia. We have our screencasts over on YouTube, the Foreclosurepedia channel, and always at foreclosurepedia.org. We'd like to give a special shout out to Amazon.com, whom provides our S3 podcast and video storage, and Cloudflare for hosting Foreclosurepedia in 24 different geo-positioned servers, pro bono as well. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, feel free to give me a shout out, COO at foreclosurepedia.org.